This happened my first summer back home from my freshman year of college. I started up a part-time job delivering pizza in a small town about 30 minutes away from where I lived. The area, in rural Georgia, is known for having places that are in the middle of nowhere, and the pizza place's whole shtick was that it delivered to even the most remote areas imaginable within the town limits. I could fill books with weird experiences from that summer. From the call that came from a long-abandoned warehouse to the dog that got excited about the pizza and accidentally shredded my pants with her claws. But one will always stand out in my mind as the creepiest. It was getting fairly late at night, around 10:30 p.m., so I was pretty confident that I wouldn't be sent on any more delivery calls before closing at 11. However, someone barely managed to miss the cutoff time, and our clerk readily accepted their order. When the food was ready, I was given the address and a single box of hot dough and sent on my way. The first red flag was the driveway, or rather, lack thereof. There was a mailbox, but no actual driveway, not even gravel. It was just grass and a barely distinguishable trodden pathway that resembled more of a service trail than it did something frequently used. I bumped along, wondering if I was even en route to the right place, when I saw a slightly above average size house come over the horizon. This place was horribly dilapidated and completely surrounded by overgrown woods. I guesstimated where the rest of the driveway led and ended up parking in a grassy patch that could have been the walkway just as easily as it could have been the front yard. With my headlights aimed toward the porch, as per company policy, I walked up to the door, but I believe that calling it a door would be generous. It was a heavily damaged frame, and the door itself was just a large slab of wood propped haphazardly against the side of the house, barely even covering the entrance. This was red flag number 2. The third and fourth red flags were also on the door. This included a sheet of printer paper with the words "around back" scribbled in all caps, which was hanging just below the place where somebody had self-engraved the door with the title Manson Family Ranch. Typically, I would never go around the back of a house, especially a shady, unlit house, and especially at night. However, it was my last drop of the day, and I was ready to get it over with and be on my way home. Against my better judgment, I traipsed around to the back of the house. The back door here was an actual door, but it was covered in both old and fresh cobwebs. Clearly this was a door that had not been used in some time. I found the cleanest area available and knocked. I counted to 45 and knocked again. There were no lights on in the house, and I could hear no movement from inside. I knocked and counted again and repeated the sequence 3 more times before I was finally creeped enough to decide to return to my car. As I turned, I finally heard a voice coming from inside the house, clearly agitated, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. I tried to knock one more time, and as I was counting, I heard something in the woods behind me. It started out as just movement deep in the trees, but soon enough, I could make out distinct running footsteps coming directly towards me through the brush. I stood there frozen, staring in the direction of the noise coming from the woods, which was around 15 feet away from me. In the moonlight, I could clearly see the woman who had stepped out. She was relatively old, maybe in her 60s, I would guess. She had long blonde gray hair, which was tangled and matted and hung down past her hips. She was in what looked to originally be a white nightgown, but at that time it was dingy and closer to beige in color. She was absolutely barefoot, and her feet were covered in dirt and what had to be blood, presumably due to the fact that she had just sprinted through the prickly woods where there was no trail to be seen. I never learned her name, but I still affectionately refer to her as red flag number 5. She stopped short when she saw me, and started to shake her head no, with eyes wide. I continued standing still like a terrified deer in headlights, as she took a few more steps toward me, reaching out to me with her finger pointed. Her voice came out way stronger than mine would have at the time when she spoke. You know how a southern accent can either sound like a loving grandmother or a backwoods murderer? Well, She sounded like the latter when she drawled, "Oh, no, 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 honey. No, you get on. You get on out of here." I wish I could say I listened. I ran, I left, but I was so in shock at how events were playing out that my own self-preservation was on the back burner while I tried to figure out what was happening. She seemed to realize that I was not moving, even if I could not make my mouth move to ask her what was happening, or even what to do with the stupid pizza in my hands. She looked at me like she could have smacked the hell out of me right then and there, and proceeded to deliver red flags 6 through 12. "Darlin', did you hear me? People like you come out here, and they don't get to leave." So I finally quit being the typical horror movie victim when I realized that this was not a funny little ghost story. This was a 5'3", 116-pound me potentially being targeted to be robbed, kidnapped, or worse. I dropped the food immediately and started running back to my car, which I had stupidly left on and unlocked, as was usual for most of my deliveries. As I neared the car, I heard a slam coming from behind me, and I looked over my shoulder to see that the wooden door had been pushed over and had fallen into the porch beneath it. As I was closing the car door, an older man was limping down the front steps, waving his arm like an airplane runway attendant at me and shouting. At a loss for words or what to do, I called out something muttery and shaky, and something along the lines of, "Pizza's out back." I floored the gas and somehow managed to avoid trees on the odd trail back to the main road, which was still 12 miles and several turns from any road that actually had a name, let alone painted lines. I reported it to my manager, and he said he contacted the police, but nothing ever came of it that I'm aware of. Either way, that was my first, and hopefully last, personal encounter with the self-proclaimed Manson family ranch. This happened about 4 years ago. I was attending college in a small town about 45 minutes away from any major city. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else, and the only strangers around were cycled in and out every fall semester. Being that it was my junior year, and my increasing coursework was met with equally decreasing grant money, I decided it would be best to take up a job at the local pizzeria. This pizzeria, much like the town itself, was frequented by locals and impaired college students alike. After working here for most of the fall, I learned the names of almost every customer and could drive to their homes or dorm rooms in my sleep. One night, around 11:50 p.m., about 10 minutes before closing, we received a call from an unknown number with an unfamiliar name. The owner, thrilled at the prospect of a new lifelong patron, decided to rewarm the ovens, take the order, and have me drop it off on my way out for the evening. So around 12:15, with the address in hand and a newfound annoyance from my boss, I left from the shop and began my 18-minute one-way journey to this new address. I had been on other deliveries nearby, but this particular delivery was on a dead-end road and almost the last property at the end of it. When I pulled off of the dead-end road and onto the dirt path driveway, I could see only what my headlights and the small amount of moonlight would afford me. The driveway itself was uneven, the yard surrounding it was unkept and neglected, and the house, which was now coming into view, was a large manor with hardly any lights on. I grabbed the pizza and made my way up the rickety wooden stairs to the unlit entrance. I knocked hard against the heavy wooden door and waited for only 5 seconds or so before the door quickly swung open, revealing a man in his mid to late 50s. Answering the door so quickly after knocking was a bit of a red flag for me, but I assumed he was just super hungry. He now stood in front of me, and with an overly eager smile, greeted me with a faint but direct, "Why, hello there." Hey, got your pizza right here," I said. The man turned immediately to face the dark inside of the house and yelled, "Honey, the food is here." There was no reply as he turned his focus back to me. "Let me go get my wallet. Come wait out of the cold for a minute." Being that I was a scrawny male during a western New York autumn, I happily stepped inside out of the cold for a moment. "You wait right there, and I will be right back," he said while gesturing to a nearby wall. He took the pizza into another room, and I stood still in the dimly lit entrance. I could hear shuffling around in the direction he went, but my focus was on other things. I could now see that the living room and dining room to my left were completely empty. There were no rugs, no furniture, not even a picture on the wall. I found this odd, as I now recall not seeing another vehicle in the driveway when I approached. Slightly panicked, I looked to the direction the man went, and I froze when I saw the man with the same toothy grin peeking at me from around the corner of the wall. He knew I saw him and quickly tried to reinstate my confidence with a mumbled, "Just grabbing my wallet, sorry," and he disappeared again behind the wall. Complete discomfort had me unable to think. I wanted to just leave the food and run. While I thought about my options, still paralyzed in fear, I began hearing whispers coming from the direction that the man fled to. I don't know what came over me, but I inched closer to the wall in an attempt to hear something. Anything. As I came closer to the wall of what now appeared to be a kitchen, the mumbled whispers grew louder. About 2 steps further is all it took to hear the words, "Black jacket." At that point, I knew the whispered conversation wasn't a search for the man's wallet. It was a description. It was a description of me and what I was wearing. As I tried to process this, I continued listening until I could make out the words, "Let's go." That was more than enough for me. My fight or flight instincts kicked in. I turned to face the door I came through and sprinted as fast as I could, out the front door, down the rickety stairs, and across the beaten path to my still idling vehicle. As I transitioned from the stairs to the dirt, I could hear multiple sets of pounding footsteps ripping across the linoleum floor of the entrance I stood in only seconds earlier. I jumped in my car, threw it in drive, and when I looked toward the house, I could see the man hitting the last step, while the 2 others watched from the doorway. I floored it into the yard, making a U-turn, and sped off down the path, with only the sound of "Don't you want your money?" echoing from behind me. I sped home as quickly as I could. When I got there, I called my boss to tell him about what happened. My earlier annoyance faded as he didn't ask about the money. He just told me to call the police. I told 911 what happened, and they sent a patrol car out there. I stayed awake most of the night waiting to hear what the officers reported. When they investigated, it turns out the property had been seized by the bank 3 months earlier. The inside was strewn with garbage and debris. There was significant damage to the inside of the house, and it looks like whoever was crashing there was long gone. I stayed on at the pizzeria for another week or so, but I couldn't shake what had happened, and quit shortly after. I still wonder to this day what would have happened if I never heard them whispering. If you enjoyed these stories, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.